A quick note before we start, if you join the Patreon the day this video airs, you'll get early access to 4 videos and you get the joy of making one little artist bigly happy. I'd like to thank my patron Ennui for making this video possible and for having a handle very appropriate to today's topic. Let's get started because another year has come to a close and it's time to do some reflection. I think it's time to look back on some of the basic concepts that underlie the viewpoint of this channel and reorient back towards what we really want from our work. Let's just cover what you're seeing on screen here first. You're seeing the process I went through to draw Fallen, one of the drawings I've most recently finished. For the beginning here, I'm just mapping out the big shapes and gestures of the drawing, including the major shadow shapes on the figure. This part is straightforward, since I have a pretty good reference I'm using for this one. It's straight up figure drawing, so we'll check back in on this when things get a little more tricky. This drawing felt like a touchstone on a bunch of things. Its project and how I want that project to look, but more than that. It got me looking forward and appreciating the path behind me as well, and that made me want to make this video. Maybe this seems direct or on the nose, but I want to give you a diesel shot of motivation to push you into the new year with art vigor. You know, I'm feeling that right now. I'm really looking forward to the next year of making art. I have a lot of plans and hopes and ambitions that are really pumping me up, and I feel like I just have a lot of confidence that I can pull it off. And if you're trying to do this art thing, I want you to feel something similar, rejuvenated, alive, fresh. I want to give that to you. So, what will we actually talk about to do that? Well, let's dip back into the stuff we covered at the beginning of this channel, specifically the first 2 videos, which were really all I needed to say on this channel. Everything else has sort of been an extrapolation of those 2 basic points. But let's go back into them and remind ourselves what we're really doing with all this art stuff. First off, no one knows what art is. One of the first videos on this channel was What is Drawing?, which presented the thesis that drawing isn't anything. Its lack of an essential essence allows it to be an infinite scope of things to an infinite scope of people. Looking back, about a year and a half since I made that video, I still feel this to be true. It's uncomfortable for me at times because so much of my time is spent delivering drawings professionally, which requires me to pretend that there are real objective standards, and also training students, which also requires me to pretend that there are real objective standards. All right, maybe pretend isn't the right word. I must perform within those contexts. It's my job as an actor on those stages to live and breathe the milieu, even if I know it's just for fun. If you were acting in a scene where you needed to be angry to move the story along, it would be your responsibility to summon that anger as realistically as you could, thereby making it real for yourself, in a sense, even if nothing could possibly happen on stage to make you forget that the anger is in service of the joy and fun of the play. And that's what it is. It's for fun. We think it isn't when our art director is chewing us out, when we're struggling to improve our skills, or we flopped a deadline, but it is about fun. Fun in the broadest sense. Fun being enraptured interest. Enraptured involuntary interest. We can't stop tangling with this strange thing that has captured our fascination in the most insistent way. That's fun. That is just the automatic engagement with something and turning it over and obsessing over it. It's like that's it. Underneath the surging drama of it all, there is no reason to engage in this most absurd practice other than its complete joy. The pure, lively, jaunty silliness of it. Don't worry, I understand that this is my particular viewpoint, but that is the beauty of the emptiness of drawing. It can be whatever it needs to be to each individual because it is empty, because there's no essential, necessary part of it getting in the way of it being what you need it to be. This is a gift. This is an amazing capacity of the practice. And it's the most important thing for you to utilize as an artist. It comes before skill. It comes before techniques. It even comes before your ideas. It's the ability to decide for yourself what this means to you and what you need to do with it, what you need to put in and what you will get out of it. And what I mean by get out of it is what small or incomprehensibly grand joys you will get out of it. Even that is up to you. It's all up to you. And no one and no thing can invalidate your choices there. It's on you. You get to decide what this is. Do try not to go full Picasso and be an asshole. There's no need for that, but you do get to choose. You really do get to choose. That is the gift of the emptiness of drawing and making art in general. The second video on the channel is how to get in the zone. Now, I made a whole lot of drawing meditation videos on this channel, but that one is really all you need. The 3 main points I'm trying to make are covered in that video. 1, you make many unconscious decisions when you draw, which can be examined and magnified, but never fully understood. 2, upon close inspection, it becomes clear that you can't be quite sure where the drawing is happening. Your head, your hand, on the paper. It doesn't fit anywhere. And your sense of authorship is quickly put under attack as you make progress down this route. And finally, 3, when you release all of this and simply allow the drawing to unfold on its own, without your opinions and selfhood inflicted upon it, you disappear. And the process enters flow, which you have no part in. You're gone. Because you were never there. You've just stopped standing up and insisting that you must be. That all always feels vaguely crazy to say, but I always wind up having to stick with it because when I scrutinize those points, they just reestablish themselves as true. It's the opposite view, that your sense of self is somehow close enough to the process to really control this thing and so have authorship over it and all of the personal responsibility that goes with it. That's what fails under scrutiny. That's what makes no sense and has no evidence to support it. Let me make a couple caveats here because we have the time. I obviously know you're real. I know you're over there and I can go to lunch with you and your feelings have moral and ethical value. I'm using the word self in a very particular sense here. I'm talking about the imagined perfect art agent in our heads, the ego, who we think of as the choice maker, who is required to be in the mix of all this stuff in order to justify all of our art angst and art suffering, right? Art angst and art suffering doesn't make sense unless it was all of our choices really under our control, that all of our failures, the ultimate responsibility for our failures is on us, right? That's the only way we can make sense of art angst and art suffering. That's the self. That perfect agent that is the central focus of that responsibility, that's the self that obviously isn't real. Yet we would all rather roil in horrible existential art pain for 50 years than relinquish it and enjoy what we're doing. Again, let me point you at the experience of flow, the most important thing in the practice. That's why I made that video before anything else on the channel. Flow contains everything you need to prove this and explain these points to you in a way that me talking about it can't. Just think about it. All artists do their best work in flow. That's when the cacophony of impossibilities that need to be juggled to make a drawing occur effortlessly. And the single defining characteristic of noticeable flow is that you realize you were in it after the fact when you look at the clock. So, you weren't there during flow in any substantial sense. All that was there was the part of you that is inaccessible to the you that you identify with, whatever that is. Don't ignore it. We tend to just take that as a happy little piece of candy and then not pay attention to what must be true about the practice for that to even be possible. You don't do it. At least not the part of you that you live as. And if that's the case, then it's always the case. It's already true. I can invoke you to let go here, but even that's a lie. There's nothing to let go of. You're already freely careening through this thing. You just need to realize it and start enjoying the fall. The fall. Enjoy it. Go. Go see how this thing's gonna go. Draw, damn it. There's a typical Instagram motivation path to go down here with platitudes like, oh, you're the only one getting in your way, or something like that. See, that's not it. You're not in your own way. You just think you are. You invent this problem with your prejudices and preferences. You lovingly erect an edifice of dissatisfaction and confusion by thinking you need to be this good by this time, or you didn't draw today, so today is a waste. You waste all of your energy on this, so of course you don't draw. When you realize that drawing isn't hard and requires zero effort, no matter how complicated the subject, of course you have infinite energy to draw. Of course you can draw when your opinion of it doesn't matter. Just move your hand. You can move your hand forever if it has no personal weight, if it means nothing about you or your path or how you evaluate yourself as an artist. And even though I'm here imploring you, pouring my guts out, trying to get you to ease up so that you can just draw joyfully forever, you're still going to think, yeah, but Steven, damn it, it's got to be good. I'm not trying to just move my hand. I get what you're saying, but I need to move my hand and have it be good. I beg you, please, just do it. Just try. Go watch How to Get in the Zone from the beginning of this channel and do the exercise. Maybe a few times. Just let go and draw and watch and observe and let yourself be amazed when you make something you like by accident after just drawing without judgment for 5 minutes. And when that happens, just please don't ignore it. It only takes not ignoring it once to change your life, to change the practice forever. You'll make something better than your usual when you're relaxed and not stressing and just doing it 8 million times, and you'll ignore it 8 million times. And the one day that you don't will change the practice forever. This stuff is already true. Your pained viewpoint is the lie. And you just need one good day to see it, Let go. Move your hand. Watch something you like come out, and then get married to what that must mean. If you find some way to convince yourself that all of that, All of that, how impossibly complicated everything must be for that to be possible, for it to be true that you can do your best, super complicated artwork when you're not there, when you're not consciously choosing. If you can convince yourself that that is an accident, then you need to start having that accident much more often, because the drawings that you reason your way through suck in comparison. Okay, look, maybe I got a little caught up there. I just really want you to keep making art. Let's take a quick break to look at the drawing. Yeah, let's see what I'm doing here. Doing hands, I see. Yep, no short ways about it. Gotta draw 'em slow and careful. I think at least a whole 2 sitting sessions on this drawing went into the hands. You need to give them as much time as the whole rest of the figure, often. Even that might not be enough. I'm looking at my hands right now, and they're doing the thing where they become odd because you're thinking about them, like really looking at what they really look like. It's strange that we insist that they be complete and expressive in art when they're just like 5 meat tentacles coming out of a block of fat pads. They're odd things. I got lucky in this drawing that they both wound up being kind of curled up so that they move away from the meat tentacle thing. But you can see in the way that they're mapped out the comparison between rendered areas, like what's going on in the forearm right above that left hand, and the more straightforward schematic mapping that the hands actually have on them. That one on the right has it really clearly. So there's only the true light plane on the top left-hand side of the back of the hand. And then there's true shadow on the right side and in between the fingers. And then there's some hatching to indicate a whole area of halftone. So that's me saying that's not completely shadowed, but for example, the fingers after the knuckles, the fingers below the knuckles, you know that that's taking like a 90-degree turn from in comparison to the plane of the back of the hand. So that couldn't possibly be the same value, couldn't be handled as the same plane as the back of the hand. All of those fingers as they curl under must be significantly different, but not quite shadow. So they got a general hatching pass at this step to let me know that they're in a halftone area, a general darkening. And I have departed from the hands and am picking away at the forearm. I did just want to leave a schematic for the hands at this point. I do go back and render them later, but at this first step, I only delineate true shadow, general light, and the halftone. On the forearm, I've done quite a bit more development. You could see at this stage, I'm trying to establish some of the more conspicuous muscle bellies and muscle tendons and smaller forms of the forearm using my eraser. I'm even carving in a couple veins at this point. I do love using the eraser over work that's already nice and soft and has already been pretty developed. It helps to hide the process and confuse the viewer's eye a little bit, which I think is a big part of making something look real or convincing or believable. In reality, small forms, big forms, medium forms, they all play together in a very nuanced and perfect way with no real rules, you know? Medium forms interact with and inform small forms interact with and inform big forms. It is not as straightforward as we think, and it's all quite beautiful. Moving up to the head here, starting to pick out, again, just like I did on the forearm, smaller forms with the eraser, and just dialing in some of the tight shapes around the eye. This head is really dominated by its shadow pattern. Not all heads are like that. Some heads are dominated by their halftones. Some heads are dominated by their softness. For example, if you're doing a frontally lit, classically appealing shot of a soft character, like a beautiful woman or a young child, those shots, those heads tend to be dominated by the softness of the planes of the head. And if you were to design that head so that it was dominated by its shadow pattern, it would add a harshness to it that is a little bit classically inappropriate for the subject matter. Not to say that there's no way to pull it off, but just going with the classical sense. But this one, all shadow pattern, which is perfectly fine for this character type. And it has a very aggressive shape, that shadow pattern. You can see that I'm really trying to demarcate that here. So underneath the eye, where I'm describing the shadow shape that is going on in the bags under his eyes, you see that it has a little sawtooth pattern, right? It has jagged edges. If you were doing a softer character, you would not want to interpret those that way. You would want to smooth those out, maybe into just a clear crescent shape. But with this kind of character, perfectly appropriate to make those a sawtooth shape. You can see a bunch of those. So you can see as you go down the cheek line on the right, where that shadow delineates the transition from cheek into jaw, that has its own little sawtooth shapes. There's down by the chin, there's that shadow at the bottom of the chin, and then right above it, a shadow right underneath the barrel of the mouth. Both of those are these big triangles that are jutting out into the light shape. Again, aggressive. The cumulative character of what you present in your final drawing is, of course, by necessity, going to be determined by the small choices that you made design-wise all throughout leading up to the finish. So if you want an aggressive, jagged character, everything about him, maybe not everything, with balance, but the dominant feeling about all of the things that constitute that character must be jagged and aggressive, including the shadow shapes. So the shadow shapes are essential for communicating the nature of your subject, especially because in the style of drawing like this one, those shadow shapes are dominant contrast-wise. Nothing gets more contrast than the shadow shapes, so they've got to be just right. And here I go doing one of the most boring things about pencil drawing, so it's probably time for me to think of something else to talk about. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, I have begun blocking in a large, flat area of shadow. Wow, how exciting. There is nothing to do there but to do it. I think I have brought this up many times, but the general process is you take one pass with the pencil at a pretty low angle to the paper, you take your time, you go back, you do a second pass with the pencil on a more perpendicular angle to the paper, so pointing straight down into it to catch new fibers, and you take your time. And then you take a kneaded eraser and you make a tiny little point with the kneaded eraser and you use it to go back in and you pick out areas that got too dark. And inevitably, when you do that, you make some areas accidentally a little too light. So then you take your pencil and you fill in that little area a little too light. And the reason that you will not see me do that whole process anywhere here is because it is as boring as it sounds. And you know what? It just ain't worth it for me, so I don't do it. I just choose to like grain instead. I'm also veering into the graphic, stylized, weird elements on the right and left side of this drawing here. These are very amorphous for me. They're made out of reactions to moments that go down on the paper. I don't have a very specific plan for them. I don't have a very clear vision of them in my head when I do them. So you will see that I put them in much more lightly than I put in something that I have more confidence with, like the figure, right? I also redo a lot of parts of it, just looking for a better seed, I think of it as. There's all sorts of different seeds, so some parts of it will be based off of my reaction to some stray lines that I drew. Other parts will be a reaction to a bunch of stump smudging like I was just doing there a second ago. Others I will delineate with the pencil more clearly a value area, but not lines, like a big value shape, and I will use that as a seed to react to. And then a lot of the times it's all of those things blending together. So I'll sketch a line that will transition into a value shape that will get smudged, that I'll then draw over, and then I'll erase into that and scry some lines over that, and then I'll smudge it again, and I'll just really like layer effects until I lose the plot with the pencil-like stuff. Like it's no longer a line or a value shape or a smudge. Now it's all of those things to some capacity, or it's transitioning between those things in a wild or unexpected way. That's the feeling that I'm looking for with areas like that. And it's very personal. Like, I think if you want to get stuff like that into your drawings, you do need to find a way to excite yourself about them. But that's one of the most fun things about doing drawings like this. So if you're into doing work like this, I do recommend you find some way to excite yourself about that kind of thing. And here I go, down to the knee. An ode to the knee. Dear knee, why do you be? There's so many other things to be than to be a knee. Why not try the sea? Or maybe a tree? Why, when you're so free, must you be a knee? Far be it from me to decry your ancient seat as middleman knee, living happily between hip and feet, but I must say, there's other ways to adduct my leg without being so damn... Sorry. You see, it's just so hard to draw thee, knee, with your pads and your tendons and, God help me, your bones, so susceptible to all things rheumatoid, one of which dares to be sesamoid. Who even knows what that means? I do, because I've been studying you for so long, knee. Now please, let me be, and just come out well, dear knee. Sincerely, your friend, Steve. So that whole knee just comes down to one linked shadow shape. Again, sawtoothy, jagged, aggressive. It gets cut off, so it's contrasty. You know, it's attention grabbing that it ends suddenly there. It's good practice in general to unify your shadow shapes into the biggest shape they can be while still being characteristic of the anatomy that they're on. Good rule of thumb. Moving up to that leg. This upper leg remains unrendered for a very long time in this drawing, and that's because I knew from the beginning that I wasn't going to put very much information at all in it. It was basically going to be an unmodulated value shape of that shape that you see it now. So I didn't really feel the need to jump in and start picking at it until the very end. Most likely, it would have wound up being over-rendered if I started drawing on it now, because I would have wanted to react to the empty space around it and felt like I had all this contrast that I could use because no contrast has been slung around in the areas around the leg. But because it happened near last, because I think the background was already in and darkened down by the time I got to that leg, that gave me a lot more information to say that it really needed to be subdued and subordinated and pushed back. So it felt properly flat in the final render. It was what I was going for with that one. And the same thing that I did on the figure, going in and doing it all over the rock that the character is leaning on as well. So laying in the big basic shapes and then picking shadow tone, light area, and half tone. And that's it. That's enough of a schematic. And then I save that for later as well. Here we go with the pastel. I usually don't record this step. I'm glad that I did for this one. So this is a step that I don't do on every drawing. I do it on most drawings where I want the background to be generally darker. I will skip it if it's only parts of the background that are darker, or if there's a lot of like props or scenery in the background. But with a simple background like this one that I generally want to be darker, there's almost no way around it. You just have to manually darken everything. So you could just go in with the pencil, and that might ultimately be the cleanest choice. It's also extremely time consuming to flat large areas like that with a pencil. So I went with the pastel. This is Pan Pastel Black. I believe it's the extra soft or extra smooth. I think extra soft, but I don't actually know if they sell another softness. As far as I know, they only make extra soft, but it's labeled as that. They sell them in those little pans, and you can also pick up the sponges. I'm using one of their sponges for this, but you could apply it with all sorts of stuff. You can apply it with paper towel. You can apply it with a brush. You can dip a brush in that little pan and rub it all over your drawing. But for this particular one, I'm using one of their official sponges, which is really, I think it's the same as just like a makeup sponge, but they sell a nice flat round one. They're super cheap. And I'm dipping the sponge into the pan and I'm folding it around my forefinger with my thumb and my middle finger. So I'm not pressing it flat against the paper. I'm bending it so that it's curved, and then I'm using that curve to get mostly soft edges on every stroke that I put down. Unfortunately, I haven't found a way to get perfectly soft edges on all sides. There's just no way around it. No matter how you hold it, some edge of the sponge is going to be sharper than other edges of the sponge. But that is not really that big of a deal when compared to the sharpness of the pencil lines. They all do kind of blur together. So I hold it like that, I dip it, and I usually knock off most of the pastel onto the paper towel first, and then with barely any pastel left on the sponge, I will then rub into the drawing. Not only is it useful for knocking back the value of the background, but it is also useful for creating a vignette in from the edges of the piece. So I really think about that mostly while I'm doing it. So I'll start on the tape that defines the border of the drawing, and I'll push from the tape into the drawing. It's very hard to tell here because this is slightly sped up. It makes it look like I'm scrubbing back and forth, but I'm actually not. I'm only pulling or pushing the sponge once, and then I'm lifting it. So I'll start on the tape, push the sponge, and then lift it off, move down an inch, and then do it again, do it again, do it again. It's very rare that I actually scrub with it. I've tried that, and you can actually get nice flat areas by doing that, but it is a little more unreliable. But I would advise you, if you're going to use a tool like this, to just plan for it to be unreliable. As much as I've tried, I can find no way to produce consistent, controllable results with these soft, dry mediums like this. It's just in their nature that they be a little chaotic and do some crazy stuff. So I instead like to just plan for that and just be okay with it and be a little slapdash with how I apply it and know that I'm going to have opportunities after the fact to correct it. So you will see that all of this background that I'm putting in now, this is not the final word on this background. I go over all of it with a pencil near the end. A very small pencil, but it's still faster to do that than to knock everything in with the pencil to begin with. Because I know I'm going to go over all of this with a pencil, I don't worry about it so much. It's not the final word on what this background is going to look like. I'm going to be able to balance it more later, and the pencil will unify it and also give me opportunities to blend it into the actual edges of the figure that it's interacting with. And I do think I actually take, in certain places, second passes with the sponge. I don't remember if I recorded those parts in particular, but if a spot came out too light, or if I feel like the whole thing in general was not dark enough, I try not to be lazy and just go in again and do another pass with the pastel. But I find that it actually will only go so dark on the paper that I like to use. This paper really doesn't have a lot of tooth. The fibers are very low. They're very low profile, which is what makes it smooth. There's only so much for the pastel to be caught onto. And these pastels are very, very soft. They don't adhere very much at all. They're super powdery. So even on several passes, it's very hard to get the pastel to give me more than a middle gray. It's very hard to get it to be like black, black, black. So I try not to even go for it. I try to instead leave stuff like that for pencil work over the pastel after the fact. It's a learning curve. You've got to rehearse and practice with this stuff a bit, but I do think it's worth it. It does save a noticeable amount of time as opposed to flatting in huge areas like that with a pencil. And every now and then, you will leave a little patch that is just like glass smooth and perfect. I can only do that by accident right now. Those little patches are enough for me to be like, damn, I still got to figure this out. If I could find some way to do that reliably every time, man, that'd be great. But yeah, it's accidents for me so far. What do you think? You think that was enough talk about technique? Come on, let's wax rhapsodic about art for a while. Let me ask you, When you put down a stroke and you don't like it, where does that come from? What part of you is deciding that you don't like that stroke? Is it a part of you that's under your control? There would be a lot of utility in the ability to choose to like that stroke, just to make it a little easier to get through the drawing day. Is that choice available to you? Can you choose to love what you just put down? If you can't choose either way, if you are not the one deciding if you love a stroke or hate a stroke, and if you can't choose to hate a stroke that you like or like a stroke that you hate, what does that mean? Also, does it mean anything? Maybe for you, the choice that you make is that that weirdness is just inconsequential. That's perfectly valid. You have to decide for yourself where you're going to draw the line on all these sorts of questions. For me personally, it is consequential. It does affect the practice. Now, I'm not really advocating for any particular viewpoint here. What I'm always advocating for is to do your best to remember that you don't know. You can't be sure. Anything might be true here, but no one can claim absolute certainty about these things. It's possible that you don't actually have complete control over your art, that it is some sort of separate process that runs the way that it will, divorced from your ambitions, your goals, and your emotions. It's also possible that you have complete control over it, and all of its successes and failures are true reflections of your personal responsibility. Those are both possible, and it's also possible that both are correct at one time or the other. But even if that's the case, how can you be sure which of those is happening at any given time? I would say you can't be sure, so it's better to remain open. Just be open. Drawing is a vast field of experience, vaster than we can imagine. So just remain open to the idea that anything could be happening in that space at any time. So if right now you're feeling closed off, bound up, shackled, or bored by your practice, if you just feel like you don't know where to go with it, if you feel like you can't be sure that you're doing the right thing, if you feel like you don't have any good ideas, if you just can't be creative, just see all of that for what it is, just thoughts, just experiences, and realize that you could, right now, right this instant, just snap into it and be totally fine with all of that. And be in a place where you won't let those feelings, those thoughts, those nothing keep you from drawing, from just moving that hand on a piece of paper, from exercising this incredible creative impulse that you have. Know that you have that available to you. That mind space is available to you at any time because there's nothing actually getting in the way of it. There's nothing about your practice, nothing about your drawing, nothing obstructing your path to that place of experience. The thing that you think would be the thoughts, those are insubstantial, less than air, nothing, just starlight glittering to and fro from one side of your mental space to the other. They can't stop anything. Just move into it. Just be at peace. Be free to be creative. Whether you do a great job, whether you do a poor job, just draw. Draw for the sheer mystery of it. Draw because you don't know why you want to. Draw because you're not sure what's going to come out. Draw because you want to explore the unknown. Draw because you want to let the piece of paper surprise you. Draw because you don't want to know that you would nail it. Draw because you want to remind yourself that you can flub this, that you can mess this up, that it's not under your control, that it is not going to bend to your expectations. Draw as a way to prove to yourself that you do not have complete agency over this creative impulse and that it will do what it will. And remind yourself that you are in relationship to it instead of controlling it. Draw to remind yourself of that. A successful drawing or a failure of a drawing are both equally good at reminding you of that. Just go into that space and see what there is to discover. Find out. Find out. All you have to do to find out is get in with the pencil and start carving out. Start making the thing. Start looking for an answer, a non-answer, a question, just anything, just whatever you do, just don't stop. Just don't not do it. Don't hold it in. Don't let your sadness or your anger or your frustration, don't let that get in the way. They can't get in the way. There's nothing about them that allows them to get in the way. It's all an illusion to think that they're getting in the way and keeping you from doing it. Just do it. Just whatever you do, don't stop. Don't give up. Don't throw in the towel. Don't quit drawing. Don't think that being an artist is not for you. Stop inflicting all of your expectations and your weird desires and thinking that it needs to be all of these things that it's not. Just stop with all of that and do it. Everything else will follow. Everything else will follow by natural conditions. And it's never personal. The conditions are just the conditions. You're going to do a good drawing of this type of thing if you've practiced that type of thing enough times. Is that personal at all? Does that have any self-reflectance on you? No. No. And that's all it is. That's all it is. It's not any of the personal stuff that you add on to that. Don't worry about that stuff. It's nothing. It's nothing. Just work. Just draw. Please. 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 If you have a creative impulse at all, if you have any interest in making art and being an artist, please, we need you. The world needs you. Artists make strange, ineffable things. They are the very bedrock of new ideas and the weird, percolating, capillary action of new input that decides the flavor and character of the zeitgeist as the whole human experience rolls on. We need you. You need to be a part of that. It doesn't matter if you're good or bad at art. Bad pictures influence the world just as much as good pictures do. No one wants to admit that, but it's true. Once you stop looking past the ideas of things that are influential being validated by success or money, no. Bad things influence the world just as much as good things. We need you. I wish you an infinitude of good drawings, of course, but damn it, even your bad drawings are a contribution, and surely they're a contribution to your personal relationship with the practice of drawing. But before I go deeper into a discussion about the personal relationship with drawing, let me just make a quick aside to point out that the 0.3 mechanical pencil is out and happening on the drawing now. And that is because in the way that I draw and the types of paper that I tend to use, there's usually a point where I have loaded most of the paper's surface with enough graphite that it's very difficult to get the standard 0.5 HB mechanical pencil that I use for a lot of the work to leave a very dark mark. I have just already covered so much of the paper's fibers with graphite that it starts giving me diminishing returns. Taking out the 0.3 mechanical pencil at a stage like this, which I believe has H or B lead in it. I don't quite remember right now. I think it's not HB. It's either a step harder or a step softer, but that's kind of arbitrary. That's just what it came with. Using the 0.3 here, it's not about details. It's that it can hit parts of the paper's fibers that the 0.5 could not get into because it was too thick. And that means that even though it's a smaller, possibly harder lead that is used more delicately, at this stage in the drawing, it will actually leave a darker mark in these areas that are already worked up than the 0.5 will. Now, what was I saying about the personal relationship with Her Majesty Drawing? She doesn't care if the drawings are good or bad. She just wants to enslave you and make it so that you are always there available for her to plunge a drawing into. Who knows, if you're lucky, if you make yourself a better and better vessel for her, one day she will bless you with something incredible. If that's possible, if that could happen, don't you want to lay the groundwork for that? Don't you want to start doing whatever it takes to make sure that you're available for that experience when it comes? I'll tell you honestly that when I'm wrestling with a drawing that I'm working on for a week, 2 weeks, however long it takes, I often find myself in moments of leisure, like if I'm on a run or something like that, I will have in my mind an imagined conversation with the spirit of drawing, trying to figure out what the heck to do to that drawing. And when I'm conversing with the spirit of drawing, it is always in the form of the current drawing that I'm trying to figure out. And I would say that the relationship is abusive. It often pins me to the ground and is very upset with me, and it growls at me. And it is often frustrated that it's taking me so long to fix whatever issue the drawing has that I am having the whole experience for anyway. And this is oversharing. So there I am, getting on that leg. You know, I said I would come back to it and eventually render it, and there I am. So you can see it's much easier for me to feel right about severely compressing the values on this lit portion of the leg because I have the context of all of the darkness around it. If I tried to do this first, these value changes would look so subtle compared to the white of the paper around them that it just wouldn't feel satisfying, or at least it would be very difficult for me to exercise the discipline necessary to fight the urge to make it more satisfying by increasing the contrast. So it's much easier to do a very flat area like this with context. And now I'm wrestling with the little stalagmite thing that our character is leaning on here. I wrestled with it for a long time in this drawing. Most of that was not recorded, but it fought me mostly because I refused to go in and actually draw it, just get into the weeds and do all of those little tower things, those little pillars, you know, I don't know what to call it, the striations in a stalagmite. I knew they were going to be there. I knew I'd have to go in and do them at some point, but I kept trying to make it work without them. And certain finicky, detail-oriented things define the character of their structure, the structure that they're on, and it just will not look like the thing until you go in there and draw them, and I needed to for this one. I've done a lot of the work on it at this point, and it's finally starting to look like it. I remember still being frustrated at this point because even after putting in all of those little vertical segments, it just kind of made it mediocre, like it didn't elevate the drawing at all. And it did not start doing that until I added sort of the weirdness going on in the top planes, which was not the original plan, but I'll introduce them here somewhere in a second. But just some design elements that are similar to what's going on in the watery, abstract lake of fire that is around it. Look, I know it's not clear what it is. I know a material doesn't read. I know I make it impossible. That's the joy of it. And for me, that's the fun of working in monochrome. That's the fun of working in black and white and in pencil. And that's one of the major things I try to take advantage of when I do a pencil drawing. I love putting these effects, these graphics, these transformations of form into the picture that would absolutely not work if it was a painting. Whenever I add these sorts of things, like everything that's going on with the ground plane there, the surface of the water or the fire, or whatever the hell I think it is, it changes from 1 second to another. If I was doing this in color, it wouldn't work. It would immediately fall apart. And adding those elements and handling that surface that way puts a stamp on this drawing that says, this can only be a drawing. This is supposed to be a drawing, right? Now, I could, of course, one day alight upon a perfect way to handle the colors to make this stuff work, but I do try it on almost all of my finished pencil drawings. Almost all of my finished pencil drawings get some color painting pass that I do after the fact in Photoshop to test things, and it has never once panned out, no matter what I have tried. So maybe one day I will figure it out, and hallelujah for that day. That'll be a great day. That'll be a very exciting day for me. But so far, I have never made it work. And honestly, that doesn't feel like a failure. It feels like I'm really hitting upon things that are specifically working within the magical realm of form separated from color. There's so many parts of a design like this that if I was forced to paint it, to color it, the whole thing would fall apart. Your mind would insist on some sort of believability of hue or material in a lot of those abstract areas that would make the drawing fall apart. I like that. And I like that it being black and white makes that hold together instead. I would recommend that if you find yourself falling into a particular type of work that you like doing, a particular style or something like that, find out why you like that. What is it about that particular way of working that entrances you, that fascinates you? It doesn't matter if you're making it up after the fact. It doesn't matter if it's a justification that you're winging. Everything in life is kind of like that. So it's perfectly fine for that to be the case here too. But elucidating that for yourself, being clear with yourself about that, often deepens your connection to that kind of work and the work that you're doing. I highly recommend this for everybody out there. It's not absolutely necessary. There's also, I'm sure you know from the way I talk about other things in art, there's also room for mystery and just being utterly confused and lost. That has a very important place as well. But there is so much to be learned from looking at everything that you are fascinated with in drawing and asking yourself, is this by accident? Let's assume that it isn't. Let's assume that there is a particular reason that I am fascinated by this, that I engage with this over and over again, and that there is a way to put that reason into words. Maybe not for anybody else, maybe no one else ever needs to know, but at least for myself, maybe I know why. Doing a lot of development work with the 0.3 here. Getting into all the little details on the abstract parts of the drawing. This is really great fun. It's really following the steps that I outlined before. I just put down a little bit of value, a little bit of shape, a little bit of line, blend them together, react to them, look for something that I like. It's very freeform. This is super fun to do, and it creates a lot of scale and free interest, and it's really not hard. All you need to do is remember that every part of the drawing is worth as much as every other part. So you're totally free to get into little details and do some little juicy parts. Treat every little thing that you can get your pencil into as a full world on its own. I mean, they are actually, of course. If these forms were real and you walked right up to them, you could get into the tiniest little bump or crevice or little hill or valley, and you would find core shadow, reflected light, cast shadow, halftones, highlights. They'd all be there. They'd all be occurring just perfectly, exactly right. everywhere, on every tiny little thing. Now it's up to you for the way that you want to draw and your viewpoint on the world of form, how much of that you want to get into any particular drawing. But it adds a sense of not realism, but a certain presence to your work to have at least one moment in there where those things are apparent, resolved, even on a tiny scale. That's what we're used to seeing in the real world, and there's something just slightly magical about getting it into a drawing. Trust me, I understand that it's not necessary at all. There's tons of incredible, captivating, jaw-dropping artwork that is utterly simplified and views the world from 1,000 miles away, and it works great. All 0.3 noodling here, just in there with my sharp little pencil. In certain areas, I'm literally picking little spots of white paper grain and forcing the pencil into those areas to get it to go dark enough. And just looking for transitions between a lot of these abstract little forms, just gliding them into and out of each other, softening those transitions, crisping them up, doing a little dance between cast shadow and reflected light areas and open shadow. Even at very, very small scales, just a reasonably sharp pencil can convey all of those things with just a few little flecks. And it builds up. It winds up making these areas that would otherwise be rather flat, somewhat convincing or exciting. And it's great fun to do. It's really great fun to do. And I don't find it boring, actually. It doesn't feel tedious. It is fun, and it's not as slow as you would think. It's actually quite fast once you get into the rhythm of it. And if you haven't plotted everything out beforehand, it doesn't feel like you're rendering or shading. It feels like you're drawing. And that's what everyone likes to do, right? So it's not boring at all. It's still drawing. Great fun. Great, great fun. Really, really closing in. Just about done. Let me just take a moment to thank you for watching this, and to thank this drawing for being a good teacher and companion for many hours. It was a distinct pleasure to do this one, and I feel honored to have not died in the middle of it. This drawing was very exciting for me. It was nice to think about it for a couple of weeks there, to visualize it as I fell asleep, to think through tricky areas as I walked the dog and took showers. Drawings, given their time to unravel, can take up so many nice moments of your life. They become a little puzzle that you're subconsciously solving as you go about the rest of your day. And that can become such a source of excitement. It can produce leap from your seat moments where you exclaim, "I know how to do that damn hand," or, "Oh, I think I know what this one means now." It's so much fun. I hope I get to do many more. I often think about that. I often think about how I have a finite amount of drawings to do in my life. It might be many more. It might be a few more. Whatever it is, there will be a number, and I tick towards it with each one. Now, I set my values and priorities for myself, and my greatest goal with a drawing is to relish it as best I can, whatever that means for that one as I do it. Drawing is my oldest friend. It feels like someone I have known and developed a relationship with over my entire lifetime. Sometimes I wonder if I can see my death coming, either from age or sickness, and I know it's around the corner, how will I say goodbye to drawing? What would be a good last one to do to honor the practice? What would it feel like to know I was doing my last one? What will it be like to put the pencil down one last time and say, goodbye, old friend. Good luck with whoever gets to draw next.